There we go.
Afternoon, gentlemen. How you doing today?
Great, Jamie. How you doing?
Fine.
Good.
Hey, I appreciate your efforts to join me today. As you know, we weren't able to have the presentation last night, and so we decided to meet today to go over the presentation, and this way we'll record it. We'll be able to push it out. We'll be able to share it on our website. It's something that people can go back and look at later. So I guess without any further ado, Josh, I'll turn it over to you to take us through the report out from our last committee meeting.
Excellent. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing us to present this and to share this information. I just want to point out we've got Kevin Blank, we've got Noah and Kirk with me today. These are all guys from our facilities master planning team, our SHP team. And they're going to be here and jump in if there's any sort of side comments that need to be made or to help out with the presentation. What I'd like to do, and thanks for setting the stage. So we had an opportunity, obviously, to meet with our facilities team, and this was our third meeting. We're getting ready to have our fourth meeting tonight, and we're going to be sharing the results of this information as we present with them tonight. For that last meeting, the agenda that we went through, we started with introductions, went through some foundational information, and then we started in by looking at the current district configuration and doing a sort of strengths and weaknesses exercise with that group, and then ultimately got into some master planning options and talked about next steps. And I think it was a very successful meeting. We're excited to be able to share that. We always come back to these three tenets of master planning as we think about making sure that we're doing successful master plans, thinking about how to make them educationally fantastic, financially responsible, and community developed and supported. And with your team right now, we're really focused on the educational delivery components of this master plan. And I think we're drilling down into some really good options that we're going to work through tonight. So this last meeting that we're reporting out on took place on March 26th. And then tonight, obviously, is the final facilities master planning committee meeting. And that'll take place at 6 p.m. tonight. And then we're going to be presenting all this information to the board at their May 1st meeting. And so where we got started with this and putting together the foundational information is we talked to the team about this great opportunity that your district is experiencing with the Ohio Facility Construction Commission. They've come back to Groveport Madison with an offer of funding and to take a look at what might be your next segment. And just as a reminder that your district's been working with OFCC since 2014. You guys did your high school project with OFCC, and you locked in your state and local shares through a segmented process with the commission. And so you locked in at 53 state, 47 local, and that there are going to be something that we're going to talk a little bit with the team about this concept of local funded initiatives and how that might factor in to the final master plan recommendation that gets made. But that ultimately this state and local shares are already locked in, which is a positive. And we have been notified that the state has roughly about $70 million to work with the district in this next segment. And so effectively the district's going to have to come up with about $62 million in this next segment in order to match the state share. So that's something we're going to be focusing on as we look at master plan options and the phasing. This just some history with the commission. Obviously, segment one was the high school. Segment two really was focused on taking a look at the rest of the students in preschool through 8th grade. And now also recognizing that there's going to be an addition necessary at the high school since the high school is starting to see student enrollment already over that 1,440 student number that it was built for. The other thing that we talked with our facilities team about is this concept of the 2/3 rule with OFCC, which is when the commission looks at the cost of renovating a building versus the cost of replacing a building. When that renovation cost exceeds 66%, the recommendation from the commission is going to be that the district consider building new. It's a recommendation. It's not a requirement. There is an ability for the district to consider keeping any facility that is over that 66%. It's just that the district may run into the need to kick in more money as local funded initiatives, meaning 100% of district share for any buildings that are over that 66%. And the reason that this factors in is because when you take a look at all the elementaries and the middle schools, all of those facilities are over the 66%. And you can see that Sedalia is the closest at 67%, but everybody else is up in that 70s, 80s, and even 90%. And so as we're considering all this, each one of these buildings effectively would have to go through a waiver process. We'd have to get our team member from OFCC to support a waiver and to go through that process with it if we are looking to keep any of the existing facilities and renovate them. So that's a component to the process that we're trying to make sure that we keep our eye on. The other foundational information that we shared with the team was the most current enrollment projection. This was run earlier this year and effectively shows that the district is going to experience an increase of roughly about 626 students over the next 10 years. And so we talked at length about, what grades are seeing the most impact from an increase in enrollment. And surprisingly, it is in the high school grades. It's actually sort of graduated from a smaller impact at elementary, a medium impact at middle school, and then a larger impact at the high school grades. And so that's factoring into our thinking as we go through this process. And so where we started after the foundational information was just to sort of talk about the current district configuration and to get the team sort of get their arms and their minds sort of wrapped around this idea of this graphic. And this graphic is really meant to be descriptive of how we're handling our student population through our pre-K through 12th grades. And so when you look at this graphic, this is the current district configuration. You can see the grades across the top, and then for Groveport Madison, you can see each of your buildings listed as they sort of take on the capacity of students in grades. And so we as a district, we have the Little Cruisers campus as our preschool component. We have 6 elementary schools that are K through 5. And then ultimately we have 3 middle schools that are 6 through 8. And then obviously the high school. And the numbers underneath each one of the buildings represent current enrollment versus capacity. So we're trying to understand that as we move forward, if we are keeping any of the existing facilities and understanding sort of what capacity they have, what ability they have to take on student load. And then obviously for the elementaries, we're focused on also understanding the modulars and their impact in the grand scheme of this. And the reason that that's so important is because the commission doesn't recognize modulars as a permanent classroom solution. So as we look at any of these buildings, so for instance, Sedalia currently has 12 modular classrooms. If we're looking to do something at Sedalia that's going to be a renovation, it's also going to have a pretty significant addition in order to bring those students that are in those modulars back into permanent construction, along with the enrollment impact. And so that's something that we're trying to stay focused on. The other thing that was a key sort of conversation with the facilities team was to think about the sites. Groveport Madison has a unique challenge that where a number of our school sites have some component of a floodplain or floodway that impact the amount of buildable area for each of the sites. And so where we started with the team was to talk to them about the sort of difference of what you will see if you got on a FEMA website or got on the Franklin County Auditor's website. And so our example was Madison Elementary because it has such a significant sort of impacted area of buildable area that could be used in either a future renovation or a future new build. So we talked about the different sort of zones of the pink area, which is zone X. This is like the 10-year floodplain, and then you've got the blue area, which is the 100-year floodplain, and then you've got the blue and pink hatch, which is the floodway. And effectively, if you think about these things, the pink area is an area that you can build in. You just have to be cognizant of the fact that there is the opportunity for that area to flood in the future. The blue area is the 100-year floodplain. If we're going to build in that, we really need to raise the level, raise the site. And so there are all kinds of impacts there. And then the blue and the pink hatch is the floodway, and that really is a kind of a no-go zone that effectively has some pretty significant requirements that's just not typically feasibly financially responsible when you take a look at this kind of impact. And so when you zoom in on taking a look at Madison Elementary School, you can see that it has all three of those components. Basically, you've got the pink area that influences just north of the elementary school building. You've got the blue area, which is the 100-year floodplain, which is where the actual play fields and playgrounds are. And then you can see the pink hatchway, the floodway in the back. And so this is a huge factor when we start thinking about where additions can be put on. You can see that this building is not really a great candidate for an addition. And so ultimately, if we were looking at this facility, we'd be either trying to cap it at its existing capacity and doing a full renovation, or potentially taking the building down and starting to build in the same spot. So that's just a factor for this building, and it's a factor for almost every one of the district's existing sites, and something that just has to be recognized as we go through the design process. So we ran the team through a series of exercises. And so the first exercise was really asking the team, which the team was made up probably 75 to 80% of district administration. And we had some community members, and then also some teachers that were also parents in the district. And so there's an interesting mix. I think it was a good mix when we're really talking about educational impact. And so we asked that team, what are the current strengths and weaknesses of the existing facilities and the existing makeup of the sites. And so we had the teams get up with Post-it notes and take a look at all the existing site configurations and really sort of focus in on what's working well today, what's not working well today. And not surprisingly, we heard a lot of the comments that we've consistently heard from the administration teams about the challenges that they have with some of their tight sites in regards to pick up and drop off and what that looks like throughout the day. We talked about some of the overcrowding that's happening. Again, the reason why we've added modulars to these elementary schools are these challenges that the district is experiencing with growth. Talked about the relationship of the schools to their neighborhoods. I thought that was a really interesting conversation to try and understand, what schools really have a strong impact or a strong relationship with their neighbors, whether the neighborhood uses the school building or site. So we talked about that at length. And so we went through this strengths and weaknesses exercise and felt like we got some really good feedback there. And then the next series of exercises that we went through were really looking at some different master plan configurations. And so from our standpoint, we started by going ahead and putting together some master plans just to get some feedback from everybody, just, as a starting point. And so I've been talking through all of our community presentations and our facility master planning committee meetings about the fact that there's really sort of three ways to sort of skin the cat, if you will. There's, this concept of renovating and adding on to the existing schools. There's the construction of all new schools. And then there's some combination of that, right, which could be some combination of some new construction, some renovating and adding. But each one of those strategies is going to require some sort of addition at the high school, because ultimately the enrollment population is telling us that the high school is just undersized to take on the 912 population. So all of these are going to have some component that's going to have to recognize that addition. So what we did is, again, another exercise where we put together all these master plans, put them up on the walls, and then asked everybody to vote. And so we gave them red dots and green dots. It's a red dot, green dot exercise, and gave everybody sort of multiple opportunities to sort of celebrate the ones that they thought were positive, and then sort of challenge the ones that they felt didn't really suit the future of Groveport Madison for the next 40 or 50 years. And then one of the things that I want to make sure that we recognize and that we were consistent in telling the group is that all these budgets are estimates right now, right? Because we're working right now from the 2023 OFCC cost set, and all of these have to be brought forward to the 2024 cost set, which has just become available within the last few days. And so we're waiting to see how that's going to impact the master plan, the master plan options that we're reviewing. And so, again, similar set of sort of experience of exercise of bringing everybody up and asking them to sort of talk together and think about these different master plan options and what works and what might have some validity that we want to sort of pull forward and get into more detail on at the next meeting. And so you can see, everybody kind Gravitating over some of the master plans, you can see some of the ones that were more successful and some of the ones that were less successful. And so I want to spend the remaining time to sort of talk through each one of those plans that we presented, and then I'll summarize them at the end and show you how the vote went. So the first series of master plan options all sort of centered on this concept of renovating and adding onto the existing facilities. And so as you're looking at the color coding of these master plan diagrams, anything that's in blue, that's an existing facility that is basically going to remain as is. So we weren't talking about doing anything at Little Cruisers campus. We're not talking about doing any renovations at the high school, again, because of that facility's age. It's so new. It's not being considered for renovation at this time, but it is being considered for addition. And so as you look at the other elementaries and middle schools, those are in gray. We're looking at those being renovated in this concept, which would be renovation to a like new condition. We always talk about the high school design manual and the requirements there. But the idea behind a renovation of this magnitude would be that if I walk into a new classroom or I walk into a renovated classroom, I would see all the same things, the same types of finishes, the same furniture, the same display, the same, effectively the look and feel of walking into that classroom would be a like new condition in any of these renovations. And so you can see that for the elementaries. You can see the grays for the middle schools. They would be renovated to a like new condition. And you can see the additions that would be required. So we would be putting additions onto every one of the elementary schools in this configuration. We would be putting a small addition on to Central, but North and South would remain the sizes that they are. And you'll notice that there would be no modulars in any of this in this master plan, and that's consistent with all the master plans. So we would remove all of the modulars and bring all the students into permanent construction. And so as you look at this is option A1, and you can see up in the top right-hand corner, this is the total for A1. So if we did all of the construction and renovations additions that you see across the bottom, that would all total up to this $260.6 million of co-funded plus local funded cost. And there's some local funded initiatives that were required in some of these that have to do with some of the oversized spaces at some of the buildings and have to do with some other components of the commission's program. And so as you look at these first series of master plan options, you're going to see option A1 and option A2. Again, the elementary school, the K through 5 solution here stays the same as an option A1. The only thing that changes here is this would be one of those combination options where we would look at possibly building new middle schools. And so we would potentially in this option go from 3 middle schools to 2 middle schools, and everything else effectively would stay the same. But you can see that this option is slightly less expensive. So we're down to $248.7 million. And that has to do with the fact that we're renovating 3 buildings. And in this configuration, we're basically building 2 new buildings. So we're less square footage, and so there's less of an impact. And then if you look at option 3, again, this looks at a different configuration of what might happen in grades 6 through 9. And so in this option, we were investigating this possibility of turning Central Middle School back into a freshman academy, which it had been at one point in time. And so here we would need a smaller addition at the high school. We would convert Central with a full renovation and a small addition into a freshman academy. And then we would build one smaller middle school that would become a new Central Middle School, and then renovate North and South. And so this concept was one where we really were just trying to investigate the impact of the possibility of doing a freshman academy. And so that's, you can see the impact there, and that this master plan's at $256.6 million. And then the last of the series of the renovations and additions, A4, this one has basically the same configuration of a freshman academy, smaller addition to the high school. And you can see we're basically, instead of building a new middle school, we would put additions on to North and South, so that we would get back to looking at 2 middle schools plus a freshman academy, as opposed to adding another middle school and then a freshman academy. And so we would effectively have, 4 buildings in that configuration. In this configuration, we have 3. So that ends all of the renovations and addition different master plan options. And so the next one set of categories, the Bs, These were all looking at new construction. So no renovations, no additions, with the exception of the high school addition. These are all new construction, basically K5s and then 6, 7, 8. And so in this configuration, we're looking at 5 elementary schools, all of them roughly around 622 students, 2 new middle schools, both at 800 students, and then again that addition at the high school. And you can see that this master plan is coming in at about $256 million. Interestingly enough, because the buildings, the cost to renovate versus cost to replace is getting so close to that, above that 66%. That you'll notice that if I go back to master plan option, if I go back to master plan option A1, which is renovating and adding on, we're at 260 million. And then if I look at building new, we're at 256 million. It's because we're effectively getting so close to that cost of renovate versus replace that the replacement cost is not significantly more. They're sort of in the same range. And so as we're looking at this, we're looking at 5 new elementaries in this configuration, 2 new middle schools, and then the addition to the high school. And then the B series is really about different configurations, K5, K6. And so if you look here, this would be B2 would look at all new K5s, but then keeping our middle school configurations of full renovations to each one of those buildings, and in addition to central. So this would keep 6, 8 basically the way it is currently configured with renovations. And this one goes down to 250 million, 251.6 million. And then B3, this is that concept of bringing back in that idea of the freshman academy. So this is very similar, obviously, to what I think we looked at in A3. But again, new K5s. And then B4, new K5s, and then again looking at middle schools with addition, new freshman academy. And you can see these are all hovering in that $250 to $260 million range. And so they're very consistent in sort of their overall cost. The next series, the C series, this looked at some different configurations of elementary schools. And so this first one, C1, this had new K4s. So we were looking at 4 new K4 buildings. And in this one, we're actually looking at them as being different sizes. And part of the reason for this is this is sort of a response to understanding how Groveport Madison is geographically divided by population. So in this configuration, we ultimately would have an elementary school that would be focused on taking on the South population. And then it would feed into its own middle school that would take on, again, the South population. And the dividing line I could show on a map, but effectively the idea is that this would take on roughly, a little bit less than maybe a third of the overall student population on the south side of the campus. And then we would have 3 elementaries that would take on the north side of the campus, and they would feed into 2 middle schools on the north side of the campus. And again, keeping the high school configuration the same with that addition that's necessary. And then we looked at some different options on this. And so C2, again, brings back in that concept of doing a freshman academy. So turning central middle school into that freshman academy and lessening the addition that's necessary at the high school. And you can see, again, these are staying in that 254 million. They're staying pretty consistent as far as the amount of cost that's associated here. And then we looked at a D series, which looked at some different configurations. This is a K6. So we've got 5 K6s feeding into 2 middle schools. This is all new construction, again, with a high school addition. And then a E1, which looked at K8s. And this was a request from a team member to look at this and try and understand the impact of this to see what it would look like if we went to a K8 district. And ultimately, we found that there are probably some challenges in being able to build 5 new buildings of this size, because they're very large buildings. So what we asked the team to do is basically to vote, right? Give them the red dots and the green dots, and ask them to effectively to go around and take a look at all the different configurations and give us some ideas about what they saw as positives and negatives. And what we saw was actually pretty consistent. There were a number of team members that were not fans of looking at renovations and additions. When we looked at this, you can see that that all 4 of the A options, which are all the different configurations of additions and renovations, scored poorly. Right, we only had a little bit of support for A2, which only saw sort of 3 people sort of say that was a configuration that they thought might be positive. So you can see that consistently these scored kind of poorly with the team. And then if you look at the Bs scored higher, at least B1. The groups weren't really fans of B2, B3, and then sort of a mixed sort of look at B4. But again, these guys scored lower than any of the other options. But if you take a look at B1, obviously there were a number of team members that looked at B1 and thought that was a good option and would be a good option for the district moving forward. So that's 5 K5s and then the 2 middle schools in addition to the high school. And then if we look at the C's and the D1 and E1, C1 scored high. So again, this is this configuration where we're looking sort of at taking on the south population with an elementary and a middle school, and then feeders for 3 elementaries and 2 middle schools for the north side of the district. C2 kind of moderate mixed. D1 scored again kind of a mix, but you can see that there was a pretty high number of folks that liked D1. And again, this was looking at a K6 population instead of either K5 or K4, and then E1 didn't score well at all. So next steps, we're getting ready to, we're still pulling the presentation together for our master planning meeting tonight. But our goal tonight is really to refine these master plan options. We're going to be reviewing each one of those master plan options that scored, and ultimately talk to the teams about some different configurations. There were some comments that were brought up. We talked for probably half an hour, 45 minutes about the pros and cons of those master plan options and trying to understand what made sense from a district standpoint and what configurations were best suited for the district. We're going to talk a lot about the site constraints and the phasing. That really has to be the next step. It's when we land on one of these options, we really have to understand what sites are available to us as a district and what those impacts are going to be. And then we're also going to have a conversation about the local funded initiatives. But to put things in perspective, what we're doing tonight is we're really focusing in. So we've got A1 still on the table, and I'll explain the reasoning for that. But we're looking at A1, C1, B1, and D1. Obviously, C1, B1, D1 scored very high, right? Our teams focused in on those and really felt like those configurations and the fact that they were going to be new construction versus renovations were kind of key, and that came up time and time again. The reason that we're keeping A1 on the table is that it's the one option that really looks at full renovations of all the buildings, and we're keeping it up there because it's kind of a compare and contrast. We want to make sure that as we talk about that we're understanding the nuances of what is required in each one of these master plan options, so that we can kind of come back to this and say, okay, if from a site configuration, from a district standpoint, if we aren't able to build everything new in this first phase, which we understand again that the state can only bring so much of their money, the state share, to the district, there's going to be some component of a future phase. And so what we want to talk about is, does that mean we focus our energies on the elementary schools as maybe phase 1, or do we focus on the middle schools? In either one of those phases, are we also going to consider the high school addition and how it factors into that? And does that need to go as part of phase 1 or phase 2? So that's a lot of the conversation that we're going to have tonight. And that's why we're kind of keeping A1 on the table to be able to talk about it and compare and contrast. So I know it's a lot of information, Jamie. I know I went through a ton of info. I know the great thing about this video is folks can stop, they can pause, they can take a look at these different options and consider them. And we're going to, I think, from my standpoint, there's going to be some opportunity for the community to be, involved in this process and think about giving us some feedback on some of these options as we move forward. But that's where we're headed. And I think we've got some really strong options to be able to consider. So we're gonna start focusing in on those and moving forward.
Well, Josh, I first want to say thank you. You're right. This was a lot of information, and this is the second time I've seen it. But maybe a blessing in disguise, the fact that we weren't able to do this in person, having this as a meet where we can record it and people can rewatch it and have a record of all this. I think you really tightened up a message to share what the work has been done to this point. I was writing down questions as we were going through, and honestly, you answered the questions going on, and so that's one of the drawbacks of not having an in-person meeting to go over this. But I thought your presentation was very thorough.
Thank you.
And if there are additional questions, people can ask them in person. The one thing I guess I would ask when it gets to the phasing part, the costs, which are cost estimates based on, it's not the updated cost set. When you're talking about different building patterns and the phasing and swing space and things like that, I assume that those could potentially be additional costs, or is that something that's baked into the calculation? Because if it's just to build a building on a site that's ready to go, that's one cost.
Yep.
If you have to renovate and tear down and move and things like that, I assume those are additional costs. Or can you address that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Tonight we're focused on trying to come up with a solution that doesn't require a lot of swing space, right? Because to your point, swing space is money that you're going to spend on the project that is a co-funded cost. It is a cost that the commission will help you co-fund. But ultimately, it's money that's spent on modulars to move students into while that construction is going on, while those renovations are going on. And then you move out and the modulars are taken down and the site's restored. And so it's money you never really recoup. And it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars on these projects. So we're going to start with a strategy tonight of what we think could be a way for us to do phase one, which wouldn't require swing space, and then allow you to, to effectively move out of facilities, reclaim sites that then could be used for phase two. And that's going to be our focus. So we're going to start there. We may not end there, but it definitely is, it's front of mind for sure. And to your point, none of these co-funded costs right now have that swing space built into them. So that would be additional cost over and above the master plan budgets that we're showing right now.
Okay.
Excellent.
That was really probably my biggest question. Again, thank you. This has been a wonderful summary of the work so far, and I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Excellent. I appreciate it. With that, Kevin, if we can, let's close the recording and we'll get this posted to the planning website.